there. Okay.
You set?
Yes,
On?
Mr. Chair.
Going to call the meeting to order. Roll call. All right. Motion to approve the September 12th agenda. Supervisor Hess, second by Crowe. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the August 23 minutes. Supervisor Luke, second by Supervisor Kroll. Are there any corrections to the minutes? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment. Are there those who wish to speak to the committee? Okay. Going once. Anyone wish to speak to the committee? Very well. Seeing none, we will move on. Administrators report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have the personnel report in your packet. Cody Melville was hired as radio operator jailer. Jordan Salentine has started as our new investigator, and you are aware of Ms. Gonzalez having resigned as our tourism coordinator, public information officer. We have done the interviews for the administrative assistant for the Veteran Service Office. We're determining whether there are candidates that rise to the top to be offered. And as always, we're continuing to advertise for radio operator jailer. As of that, I do not believe there are any other vacancies at this time that need recruitment.
Mhm.
Next was into department performance measures. At our last meeting, we had talked about performance measures for the Veteran Service Office, and I had talked about if we're looking at that, we could look at performance measures for a number of departments. As for the Veteran Service Office, there is a report that is given to the state that talks about applications for disability compensation and pension and medical expenses and educational and the like. We could do something like that. We could also do appeals and higher judgments as well. So in that respect, if it pleases the committee, what I could try to do over the next couple months is put together a variety of different performance measures for different departments and see if that would meet for the approval of the committee.
Were we going to have extension look into doing some of the things they've done in the past?
That would, I'm going to guess that would be the satisfaction surveys, which would be next, and I'll touch on that next.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
So if it pleases the committee, then I'll come back with different departments and what could be possible performance measures. And then I would think as chairs of your standing committees, you would then want to bring that back to your standing committees and discuss also with your department heads if that is a realistic measurement as to the work being done and performance being measured within their specific departments.
Okay.
Are we good? Okay.
Looks like it.
Okay. Next, you talked about satisfaction surveys. I did put in the budget some extra money under the, I believe, under the county board line to do under contracted services, to put some more money in for some satisfaction surveys. As a historical reference, I had already for this year put together two different surveys. One, if you remember back in April and May, we did an employee job satisfaction survey. And I had shared that with the committee. If the committee likes, I can resend that out to the committee and do that. What I also did was a public satisfaction survey that was sent out this summer. And you have that in front of you, which has a number of questions. Again, is the county on the right track? Do you feel that that administration, meaning staff, has concern for my issues. Are the buildings clean and maintained? Does the board make decisions that are in the best interests of the county? Does the administrator, does the county manage the budget in a fiscally responsive way? A variety of kind of different general questions as to public service, their feeling of the roads. Do they believe that the county is safe? Is Kewaunee County a good place to live, work, and play? And I'll let you read that, but what the summary basically says is that the public is generally satisfied with what Kewaunee County as a whole is doing. They definitely believe it's a safe place to live. They are happy living in Kewaunee County. They believe that the service that they receive is good. They also believe that as a county, we are, for the most part, over a majority believes that we are going in the right direction. So all positive things. We did not go into very specific questions. Again, that would make the survey extraordinarily long, and I'm not sure that that would be what we would want to do, but I thought I would share that. I just actually got this morning from UW Extension. So this was their analysis and the numbers. And if you want to then have it on a future agenda to discuss, that's fine. Also at the back of this report gives a variety of, there was space provided at the end of the survey for comments. And there were a variety of different comments, some dealing with the county, some dealing with roads and sidewalks, some dealing with safety in the county, housing, agriculture, business development, water contamination. So those are there for everyone to see as well. And it is my intent to the committee is that it's my intent to do a job satisfaction survey every year and a public satisfaction survey every year. So that way we can compare year to year whether things are getting better, whether they're staying the same, whether they're getting worse. And I'm not sure if you wanted me to go through each of those, Mr. Chair. I wasn't sure if you're wanting to do all of that. Otherwise, I think that if you're looking at the bars, the easiest ones you're going to want to look at is the gold bar and the gray bar. That is strongly agree and somewhat agree. So usually if both of those bars together and both of them together means that it's a positive reaction from the public. It's the orange bar and the bottom blue bar that are somewhat disagree or strongly disagree. The top blue bar is a not applicable or don't know. And to the public, it's not uncommon that you're going to have a percentage of them that aren't aware. And I think part of that, my belief is that a large part of that comes from that we don't really have dedicated news outlets within Kewaunee County. You can decide for yourselves whether you consider the Kewaunee Star a county paper. We do not have a county radio station. We do not have a county television station. So there are many times that people are not getting a lot of information from what are traditional news sources. So you may be getting it from Facebook, you may be getting it from your neighbor, and you may be getting it from some of these, but it's not uncommon to have a certain percentage that just don't know what's going on.
Questions? All right, where do we go from here?
Next would be the committee to discuss what would be the annual cost of living increase for the budget for
I meant
staff.
with the satisfaction.
Oh, for the satisfaction, I'm sorry, I
We wish
apologize.
to do, we wish to do further, anything further, we want particularly want a particular department drilled down on further, or just take a chance to review it, so we can do that too and take it up again next month. So we'll put it back on for next month's agenda. Supervisor Yonke?
You use Polko.
We do not use Polko. We use instead UW extension. So
We're not contracted.
we no longer have a contract. We have not paid Polko in 5 years, if not more. We did like the first two. And just for the committee's education, the job satisfaction survey with employees is done electronically. And again, it's done through UW extension. So all responses go through them, not through my office. And as for the public satisfaction survey, we took a sample of property tax owners within the county that they have property within Kewaunee County and they live within Kewaunee County. And we sent about, it says in there, we sent about 750 out with self-addressed stamped envelopes, and we got about a third of them back. So a 33% return rate which is not bad. The one thing, and we continue to talk about it, is with that, it was a little more skewed to the older residents, as opposed to if it was done possibly via social media or telephone, but telephone would be expensive. And again, social media, the question comes down to what about those people that don't have social media, but everyone has an address that you would send a letter to. So it's never perfect how you do this, but we'll continue to review as we continue on with this. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you had asked about last month about specific departments. Yes, the plan is also to do surveys of specific departments as well. And I agree that we should talk about which departments we would like to have that done.
Well, it sounds like the committee wants to digest this till next month, so we will put it on the agenda again for next month, and we'll have more questions at that point, I'm sure. Fabulous. Now moving on to annual cost of living determination.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. I can do this. You have in your packets a number of different things. You have the memo that gives my recommendation as to what the cost of living increase would be. You also have the list of consumer price index numbers that come from the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission. You have the memo from April of 2021 that helps to explain what I would call the budget statistics and trend data report that you also have in your packet. So I'll go back to, and I am handing out also, just for the committee's education, basically the FTE counts for the county by department that go back all the way to 2017. So I'll start first with the first memo that was in there. In looking at the WERC number, the WEC, from a policy standpoint, the WERC number says that the county looks at the December number and uses that as the cost of living number for the following budget year. If Kewaunee County were to follow that methodology, then the cost of living would be a 6.86% increase. In reviewing with the finance director and looking at the budget, we always look at two main criteria. Is the increase affordable, and is it sustainable? And you'll see that in my memo that I do not believe, in my judgment that a 6.86% increase is sustainable. You can make anything fit for a year, but we can't sustain it over the long term. So in looking at our budget and looking at what would be continuing years, I believe that a 4% cost of living adjustment is affordable and sustainable. And I also believe that we can afford a one-time stipend of a 1.5%, and that would be a one-time that would not go on the base of an employee's salary. So they would receive an additional 1.5 for 2023. As you can see from the numbers that follow the memo with the WERC, you're seeing that numbers going into 2023 now have a 7 after them. So inflation for our employees, which a large number of them live in Kewaunee County, they are feeling the effects of inflation. But again, from being able to pay for it, I believe that a 4% COLA and a 1.5% stipend is something that the county can both afford and sustain. Last but not least, again, with the data that we have in there, if you're looking at the one that has budget data and property tax and sales tax and the like, I can tell you that Kewaunee, and for those of you that were at the Finance Committee meeting last Friday, Kewaunee County's financial position is strong, and it continues to be strong. And I would not want to jeopardize that by adding too high of an increase that we cannot sustain, which is again why, for my recommendation, it's a 4% and a 1.5. If there's other questions, I'm more than willing to try to answer them.
Questions? I think 3% with all the steps is,
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I apologize what you said. The 4% and the 1.5, no one moves. There are no step increases.
There are no-
I apologize. There are no step increases. No
Well, that's
one
a
moves
major-
in the plan.
that's a major difference.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. So a 4%, no one
4%
moves.
Flat and no steps,
Correct.
which of course always gets a little dicey because then having the people at the bottom can never catch up, right? I mean, if you go without steps, if you just go with a flat percent, the people at the bottom never catch up.
If we plan in the future to never allow there to be
Right,
steps.
but I mean, they
My-
come out behind.
If there's, to a certain degree, they do not, because they're in the plan 1 year longer. So in that respect, in the long term, they come out a little bit better.
What would be the difference between if we did 3% and the steps?
The difference would be is that those at the top of the scale, which if you see on your, if you go to the first page, is it, I believe? Is it the second? No, it's the trying to see which page it is. You have more than half of the employees that are already at the top. So if you're doing a step increase, more than half the employees would not see that step increase.
Right.
So that's where there would be a negative effect for them.
Right, but there would be 3%, and then those on the bottom, of course, would get steps and would have a positive. And then also the long term, of course. Okay. But
In your memorandum, what's that last paragraph, fees note section? Last sentence,
On which paragraph, I'm sorry,
last paragraph,
of which,
at the bottom.
oh,
You're-
again, the 2003. Oh, please note that the one-time stipend, in other words, the 1.5, does not increase the employee base pay, I'm sorry, base pay in future years.
Okay.
Because it's a stipend, it's not a annual increase.
We would be getting 5.5%. Grant stipends 1 year, but it would be 5.5%. That would be across the board.
Correct, Mr. Chair. Again, looking at the 6.86, which I know we can't sustain.
But if we look at wage increases nationally, they're at 5.2%, and that is across the board. That's everyone. That's including, when you look at that 5.2%, that is where you're seeing the largest percent increases is in low income positions. You're not seeing those kinds of, I don't believe that you're seeing those kinds of increases on salaried or higher end positions. Our sheriff's department, that's 3-year contract. That's
3-year
that's
contract, that's 3%.
3%, yes. Yes, it's a 3-year contract, 3%.
Is that, is there steps involved with that too?
Yeah, they still get their
2%.
They would get 3% on their steps, yeah. But when we did that, of course, we also did it with the realization that an awful lot of them are at the high end. I mean, they've already reached their steps. So there's no. It worked well for the county. And for the sheriff's department. That things did well.
The only other part that I would.
They're not as happy right now as perhaps the contract negotiation committee is.
I would also point out to the committee that last year we had a 1.87% cost of living increase. That was the December number. Yet if you look at your WERC numbers, that rose substantially within this year of 2022. And a 1.09 stipend was brought before the committee, but was rejected earlier this year. Again, the thought is to assist with those that are having to deal with inflation, affordable, sustainable.
That is preference here. Personally, I think 3% with steps is good. You want to do something different or whatever. Supervisor Romden.
I just have a comment. You can take it for what it's worth. I agree that we're in a difficult time this year. High inflation rates across the country. There's not a lot we can really do about it. At the same time, I think we need to take care of our employees. We're also looking at a commitment that we made to the taxpayers in July, funding that jail project. What the rate increase is going to be on their taxes. We're also looking at, based on information Scott gave us at the time we made the decision on the jail, we're talking about the possibility of trying to eliminate approximately 4 full-time positions over the course of time. Later on in the agenda, we're going to be talking about additional compensation and possibly hiring freezes and all that kind of stuff. Just keep in mind that our basic responsibility is, as a board member, is we're the financial stewards of the taxpayers' money. And I think any opportunity from here on in to cut our budget and reduce our spending in order to honor that commitment of the tax rate when the jail is built, I think we have to keep that in mind. So whatever the committee comes up with is going to be fine, but I think we need to do something for our current employees.
Is there questions? I guess I'll ask this to the committee because I think Supervisor Rahman brings up some very good points. Is there any questions from the committee? Because at least at this point, the committee has not seen what will be the administrator's budget in 2023. I can give you a snapshot, at least for right now, if you would like.
So where would these extra dollars come from then?
It is all, the 4% plus the 1.5 is well within the budget. From the jail standpoint, we will be setting aside $600,000 for what will need to be, which is the hiring of employees as we ramp up to get there. So we'll be setting aside $600,000 in the 2023 budget. And even with that, we are able to afford the 4 and the 1.5. As for positions that are being eliminated, there are 2 that are being eliminated. We'll see what happens in the future. Right now, we continue to have a very strong financial position. We continue to be collecting a little bit more in sales tax than what we have in the past. And Paul always gives me the death look when I put out the number. But when we talk about the mill rate last year was 6.80. This year, it will be, 6.88. This year, if the administrator's budget is approved as is, it will be 6.2. So the mill rate will go down. That is different than the levy. The levy will go up, but the mill rate will go down. And the reason why is because our property values have gone up significantly.
What do you anticipate, Paul, is going to be increase in growth and revenue in the county in the coming year? What would you guess?
Traditionally, our net new construction is a little above 1%. Our sales tax has been significantly higher than we budgeted and expected, and climbing. Before that, Alexa came out and said that their projections for 2022 was above 1.5. And even in 2021, we just came in over 1.4. So that one continues to climb. Rents continue to be steady. Those are hard to predict.
But as far as revenue increase, you talk of 1% net construction. What percent do you anticipate in sales tax?
23, they're projecting from 1.5 million up to almost 1.6, so 100,000 on 1.5 is, and that one continues to grow even beyond.
So additional revenue, what other revenue would there be?
What other revenue?
An increase. I mean, that's basically it, right?
Those are the big ones. Interest will go back up, but
What I'm
that can be 6 figures as well. I would never go all the way up to what we expect interest because that's,
right. I'm just trying to.
yeah, that one's climbing significantly quite quickly.
I'm just trying to figure out where we. I mean, we're not. It's not going to increase at 5.5% or anywhere close to it.
I have a hard time saying 5.5%, but nothing I've mentioned so far is growing at 5%. So those being the big ones.
Other questions, committee?
So with that 4%, everyone's gonna, your top's gonna gain a little more.
The
Then
top,
your bottom's gonna take a while to.
It's the top is going to be, you have a bigger number. That
Right.
4% will be far more beneficial. Bottom, obviously, it's a smaller amount.
Supervisor Kroll, I I think we're mixing up two different things. Both the top and the bottom, if with what is being proposed, both receive a 4% increase.
Right.
Now, granted, 4% of a $20 an hour job is going to be is going to be twice as large as 4% of a $10 an hour job. That's simple math. The question again comes down to is from a fairness or equality standpoint, which I hate using those words because everyone's different, is that a 4% increase is the same for everybody, regardless of what your salary is. If we do it the other way, where if you're doing it by dollars, then who's ever at the top of the scale or whoever's making more money, their percentage increase would be less because you're doing it by dollar and not by percentage. So from a what I would consider to be a fairness standpoint, 4% across the board means every single employee receives the same percentage increase. It may not be the same dollar wise, but you weren't making the same dollar wise.
Right, but aren't we struggling more with getting people in? So your incentive to get these people to come. So you have your people that have been here for a long time. So if you did a 3% with a step, you're taking those people that are coming, those new people, and giving them more of an incentive by the steps.
I would,
Because like, isn't it kind of like when you have people at a certain level and there's a max that you can only at one point make? So what I'm saying is not saying that the ones on top can't make, but they're coming out more, and aren't we struggling more to find more people to come in and
No,
giving them those incentives?
what we're struggling to do is at all levels. We're struggling to retain, we're struggling to recruit. So the risk you take is that if you're not being competitive with keeping the folks that have that institutional knowledge, now they leave and now you're having to recruit to have someone come in. And more often than not, if you're recruiting, have someone to come in, they usually are, yes, you're paying them less, but they also have less knowledge. To me, again, by doing 4% across the board, I am trying to retain those folks that have been long serving Kewaunee County. And I'm also trying to retain and recruit those that have just started or are considering coming to Kewaunee County. I'm not choosing one over the other. I'm treating them equally.
You know what the impact is on a 4.4%, 1.5 stipend?
Yes, it's on your memo on the page. So on the third paragraph, 4% is 267 and the 1.5 stipend is an additional 62. That's the third paragraph on the page of the memo. And again, I want to emphasize again, it is, and I always have been a person that has tried to make decisions that from a financial standpoint that I believe the county can sustain. Because to do a large increase and then have to come back 3 years later and say to the committee that we need to make cuts doesn't make me look good, doesn't make you look good, and definitely doesn't make the employees happy.
Is the cost of insurance, I'm sure is going to go up.
Health insurance, not necessarily. We're looking, right now, we have it budgeted at 6%, but we're still talking, and this is where the finance committee will be meeting soon, is we're talking and pricing some of this out, and it could be very competitive depending on how we go forward, where there could be little to no increase or possibly even some savings.
With the same plan or changes in the plan?
With some changes, but otherwise with the current plan, 6% to 3%.
So Paul, if we were to go 3% plus using the step plan, that's going to be less, right? You go with the flat 4?
Yeah. I can't calculate that.
Okay. Usually.
The high, not that one. The highest step is 1.5, so the highest one, anybody would get was 4.5. Here's the 5.5. That's more guessing.
You have to talk to the chair. I don't.
Yes, sir.
But if you do have an increase in wage, then you have an increase
I would assume there's always, those things are always going to increase, of course.
There is, but that's calculated, and from a larger standpoint, I don't want to say it's pennies, but it doesn't have a material effect in the big picture, Supervisor Brent.
Workers, not to say that they're not important or that there aren't increased, but workers' compensation, those kinds of things, I want to say they're basically incidental. What gets you is wage increases, obviously, and then health insurance. As Supervisor Lukes was asking about health insurance, that can be a wild card some years, everybody knows. But the big one's the wage. Other questions, comments? Supervisor Robinson?
I guess the only other option I could throw out to the committee, though the longer we wait, the tougher, but this could be delayed until the October meeting, but by October, a decision has to be made.
I don't, yeah, I mean,
And I'm not advocating for it. I'm just giving the committee options.
I don't think that's. Does anybody feel that we want to kick this down the road another one? I think that's a decision to be made.
I like the 4%.
5.5% total then in a year on the national increase, and that's taking low income earners as well as 5.2% wages.
I don't believe we have a whole lot of.
Well, that's my point is when you look at that national 5.2%, that's not what they're giving to garbage men, and that's not what they're giving to bank workers. That's what they're giving. You're seeing McDonald's, Burger King, those kinds of places are getting $5 an hour jump going from 10 to 15, that kind of thing.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rompton had asked about the previous year or about the step, and I believe they did get the step last year.
Yes, it is.
So, but again, when I'm looking at this budget, I am trying to look at it from a kind of not just a specific snapshot in time. I am trying to look at the previous year and what were the increases, what's this year, and what would be next year. And that's again where I came with, I thought that a 4 and a 1.5 were possible. I know that we have a number of other counties that just last year alone, were giving 4.5% increases to their staff. And I know that we did not do that here. So I was again trying to look at it more as a trend than a specific snapshot in time.
We did give cost of living and steps last year.
Some point, the inflation has to level out. I know this year was a huge jump. What will be the difference if we gave them, cut that 4 down to, let's say, 3, and then give the extra incentive on top of it?
So doing a 3% increase and then a 2.5 in a stipend, is that what you're saying, Supervisor?
Yeah, what difference would that make?
From a monetary standpoint,
No.
small, if none.
Yeah.
But for the future, it would lower the base by a percentage point.
Right.
But that could be an option as well, Supervisor Lewis. If there's concern about the affordability, you could do a 3% and then a 2.5.
I'm looking at the future years, because, at some point, this inflation has to level off.
Well.
Hopefully, I mean-
Biden only was in office till 2024.
So yes, that is an option, Supervisor.
It sounds more palatable, or
Whatever the committee wishes to do.
So 3% with steps.
3% with steps or
With
3%
steps
plus the stipend. I think 3%, again, I'm just speaking for myself, 3% with steps is one option, 3% with the stipend, another, now obviously 4% with the stipend isn't. But I would,
What is our total payroll?
Total payroll is. Why do I not have it here? There it is, sorry. Total payroll for proposed for salary is 9.68 million. And that's with the proposed of the 4 and 1.5.
okay,
I'll make a motion, we do the 3% and step
3% plus steps.
plus steps.
Second, is there a second? Oh, can I hear a second? Is there a second or not? Okay, so there's a motion. Discussion.
What would that cost us, 3%?
You asked that question.
What would it cost us, 3% to the step?
I don't know, but it'd be less than the proposed 4% and 1.5%. Because I'd have to go through and calculate where everybody is on the pay plan to calculate the effective steps.
Okay, but where would that leave us in 3 years?
In 3 years?
Yeah.
Well, up to 4% was sustainable. If we only get 3% and steps, we're still in the same ballpark.
Are we sustainable?
Yes. Because again, the steps tend to gravitate to the top, and when somebody leaves, we start at the bottom. We can cycle through that. That 4% actually came as a part of the pay plan review study as to what was sustainable a few years ago when spoke at. So the fact that people go to the top, or those when they retire, start at the bottom and work their way through, is part of that formula that says up to 4%.
Other questions?
so you're saying about half the employees are at the top of the steps.
Back here.
My copy doesn't have that page, so I don't know if it made it in the.
I looked and I probably did. No, it doesn't have that page. I'm looking here for 2023. Of the 123 FTEs covered by the pay plan, 63 of them are already at the top of the scale. So over half are at the top of the scale.
Other questions? Further discussion?
That would make it even with the fair step.
That would. Others? Yes.
And no stipend, right?
Correct, no
That was your
stipend.
motion. no
3%
stipend.
plus
and
steps. That's the
And
motion. Other questions? Further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Personnel policy items, the department request for remote work approval. Corporation Council. It does, by alphabetical order. C comes before A as an administrator.
I just did a CIA, I did it as CIA, so that way people
CIA.
think that there's something.
Central
going on.
Intelligence.
Um,
I think so.
The reason that I put the request in, after having been involved in the conversation with everybody here, about the policy, about working remotely, not necessarily working from home. But for my office, the reason I put it in is because I'm not always at the office. Sometimes in a courtroom, in another building, and sometimes in another county. I haven't yet been in another state, but
Well, I'm gonna cut to the chase for the sake of, time here. My understanding, based on conversations we've had, is you are in a courtroom. So you are working, you're not working, you are not in your pajamas at home throwing in a load of laundry. You're in a courtroom, you're working sometimes in other locations in different courtrooms in various cases. I think, I think that's well in line with the understanding of.
in large part, yes. And I guess the request that I would actually make is the request to use my discretion as the head of the department to make that determination whether or not it's appropriate. Obviously, there's oversight and there's things that can be done if that's abused. The other thing that I guess I've talked to other department members heads about is one of the things that came up was snow days. There's a snow day. The policy right now requires that you either don't get paid, you take some of your personal time, use some other form of time in order to compensate yourself for that day. Some of the staff in some departments have the ability to continue to do work and the requirement, frankly, to continue to do work if people need help. Human services contacts Corporation Council, because we had today, we had somebody that they needed an answer on what the county's authority is and what they can do for this person right now. When there are 8 police officers and 4 medical technicians at the scene, if I tell them, I'm sorry, I can't make this call for you right now because I can't work remotely and I'm at home right now in my pajamas, that's not an acceptable answer. It's not an acceptable answer during work day. It's not an acceptable answer at 4 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning. So for those reasons, I would ask for the ability to put some of that discretion and allow myself and my staff to.
But you're working in excess of regular hours there too. I mean, it's an important difference.
In some cases, yeah. I guess that during the regular workday, what comes to mind is if I had a couple of weeks ago, I had a dental emergency that came up unexpectedly. And I had an appointment set up for the morning to get that taken care of. And I was left with an hour and a half. I was in Brown County. I was left with an hour and a half of time before my appointment. Huge cartoon watcher. So rather than watch cartoons, I took out my laptop and started working on some things for work. That I suppose would technically be working from home. I was out of my pajamas by that point, but I was working from home and hopefully not in violation of the policy.
How many hours a week? How many hours a week would you estimate the work? Altogether,
I would say it
everything
depends
that
on the
would
week
kind of
altogether.
qualify as work.
I would say on average.
So that's the point I'm making is you're talking about, I think you're being overly conscientious. I don't want to discourage that, but I think you're being overly conscientious in that I think that when those 4 o'clock calls come, they're in excess of your regular work week. So I think that's different. The only, there's other questions from supervisors. The only thing that I don't have any problems with anything you said. with the exception of the only thing that would raise a bigger issue possibly would be snow days. So now that may be something that if you're going to say, if the committee is going to say that corporation council can work from home on snow days, then you're gonna have to figure that one out. Now, I mean, I also know what happens on snow days. When people hear snow day, we all work, we're gonna have the same. If the executive committee is to say snow days now are able to be work from home, including every department, this highway department, then you're gonna be expecting the same level of productivity, or are you going to continue to require people being on those?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
All right. I have a copy of the policy, telework policy here. And I'll just read it at section 1. Purpose. The purpose of the policy is to specify criteria for allowing selected employees of the Kewaunee County Department of Human Services to work from an alternate work site. And this is just something by eliminating a couple of words and adding a couple more. The purpose of this policy is to specify criteria for allowing selected employees of Kewaunee County to work from an alternate work site when it makes sense. Okay. Then in 2, of course, the teleworking or working from an alternate work site is within rights of management. And management will determine which employees are in jobs suitable for telework. Okay. Which I would assume management is going to be department head and administrator. Am I correct?
Yeah, but we talked about this previously at our previous meeting. We've had department heads working from home. And I
No,
think
I understand. I understand.
I think the
but
committee was
I
pretty
think
clear
that-
they weren't in support of
I
that.
think that because we have the policies from other counties,
Mhm.
okay? And in the event that we get people working from home, we have to have, that form would actually go. Okay, so that we don't just have somebody, hey, I'm gonna work from home 5 days a week and I'm not coming in. I honestly, I know where you're coming from, yeah, on that. But I think that if we have a person that wants to work from home, okay, and I'm gonna pick on our Leonard corporate counsel, right? Because he's got big shoulders and I know he can handle a lot of weight. But if he feels that okay, on a snow day, he's got a copy of that form, he could easily fill it out and send it in to either the administrator, because that's the only department head technically that he would report. And he could get a yay or a nay out. Now, in an emergency situation, and I'll call it 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3. I mean, it's an emergency situation, and that's where in number 1 it says specific employees. I think that, I mean, it gives us some leeway.
I would be more comfortable with, if you wanted to go that route, I would be more comfortable with saying executive committee. And
Well,
not that it would be, but we would give that, we would approve certain positions that would have a reason. So we can look at corporate counsel and say, okay, this individual clearly has reasons why, circumstances when that would come up, such as courtroom and so forth, and simply say, hey, okay, you can do that as needed. And if we really wanted to go overboard, we could request that he, which I don't think would be necessary personally, But we could request that he give a report to the committee, though I think that's overboard. But that would be another option.
That would be an option. And again, if we have a department head that wants to do it. I don't think we need to convene the executive committee if he wants to work from home for a one-time thing. If you have an administrator, he can say yea or nay,
Yes, but
you're not gonna do it.
but he's also previously given permission to department heads to work from home on a regular basis. And the executive committee has expressed that's not their position. That's not their approach to it.
Well, who's management? Management is administration is management.
Okay, so we know that he will grant department heads the authority to work from home, and so we just, okay, I guess that's good. And so then we've given wide open permission to have more people working from home.
Then we need to maybe put something in there that, hey,
I
if
think-
we have someone that is working from home, we need to have some criteria there.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Brown.
I still am having trouble, even from our last meeting, about the reason that people need to work from home.
Exactly. I think the corporation counsel here has just described, he's not working from home.
No,
But
you're
he's
working,
described-
but you're not
He's
in the
described,
office. You're somewhere else,
Yes.
but you're working.
exactly. He's described situations where his department would not be working here. And those are very legitimate reasons.
Similar
But
to
working from
somebody
home-
being at a conference or at a
Yes.
training session or
Exactly.
whatever you want.
Well,
But
we're
just for the
getting,
sake of, I don't want to be in a nice building, I'm going to work at
Yeah.
home.
we're getting bogged
I-
down, in, I have a requirement of my position that requires me to be elsewhere, conference, court, whatever.
Issue to me.
We're getting bogged down between that and home, working from home. There's a difference, isn't there?
It is.
Clearly.
Well,
So-
I think as a point of clarification, I would bring up that appointment that I have, it doesn't have to be a medical emergency. If I have an appointment or if I have court in Brown County, Amy County at 10 o'clock. Do I drive 30 minutes to Kewaunee County and then drive an hour to another county to work in Kewaunee County for 20 minutes?
This is exactly what the human services policy though is. And we could simply put corporation counsel under that policy, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that would be a simple solution to the first one, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay, yes, Mr. Debo.
I agree you could. I guess my question would be then, make a valid point, is it easier then, rather than to change the policy to name every department head who's come before the board or before the committee to explain their particular operations and situation, and then have a number of different departments listed here? Does it make more sense to change the language of a lot of fewer words?
I think that there is a desire, a strong desire expressed previously by the executive committee to not open the doors wide open to remote work in general. And so I think there's a desire to be careful about that, and whatever the, best way to accomplish that is, I'm open to, and I think we, one possibility is that we, grant Mr. Defo the ability to do this for the time being, and we can try to formulate a more specific wording or policy on this for the next meeting too. I don't think you have to solve all of it tonight, because I'm getting the impression there's a lot of
I think each
push.
department works differently. So you came here with a statement, and
Yes.
obviously
Well, I mean,
your job, you're working in different locations. You're not working a lot from what you just said from your home. Each department's different. in that department, if they feel that they're just staying home to work, or they have another, they want to bring something to us, then they bring it to us. But I think each one should.
Quite frankly, you're not a department head, are you? You are.
Oh, sure. One-man department.
One and a quarter.
Okay.
One quarter.
Lawyers want to have things precisely worded, which is good. So what can we do to resolve this for Mr. Defo here tonight? What's the simplest way in line with, I'll ask you, Mr. Defo, what's the simplest way to accomplish your concern while acknowledging the position of the committee without changing policy overall?
I would say that the committee could make a decision and grant the authority without changing policy. The authority to table the issue of how the language is going to change. It sounds like there are a lot of other department heads that are going to their committees as well. So maybe there's a need for some change. Assessment policy. So I think waiting to see what that demands of the policy is.
We would need, though, if we were going to resolve your concern here tonight, we would need some sort of action here tonight, some sort of motion that would permit, basically, it would be worded that corporation counsel would be granted authority to work, the ability to work remotely when needed, with the expectation that would normally be on site. How do you clean that up?
That is actually pretty good, Mr. Chair.
I hope somebody wrote it down because I don't think I can repeat it.
What you basically said, the phrase that I heard, Mr. Chair, is authority when needed.
Or authority to work remotely
When needed.
when needed. The committee's okay with that. All right.
So as the attorney who decides to need it.
Well, you're going to.
I just want to clarify.
And I guess my comment on that would be that if concerns are expressed, I have a small town, small workforce. Things eventually make their way back. And if there becomes a concern, there can always be a future discussion.
I suspect what we do with county would be work very quickly if my work
I
wasn't.
think so. That reminds me, I got a letter I need to forward you. I don't know if that's something that's important, but
Thank you.
just when you said somebody would inform me pretty quickly if your work wasn't getting going. Remembering I got a lawyer, letter that looked pretty legal like that I better forward to you.
If this was the case, Mr. Chair, then to make sure that it's all above board, we would need a motion second.
Right. Is there somebody willing to make that motion? Supervisor Kroll, second?
I'll second.
Okay, Supervisor Augustine, further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there a no? Oh, Supervisor Roundtree. Okay, moving on then, IT.
I have the same request. IT, I've been in service for Kewaunee County for 21 years. For 21 years, I've been on call 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. If I do not have remote access or be able to do remote work remotely, I cannot service this county. I cannot be on call for the sheriff's department, the dispatch. I can't function. IT cannot function without remote work. But the whole reason we have technology to be able to dial in and fix things from wherever I'm at. If that's home, if that's on vacation, that's even happened in Mexico.
So you're talking, again, you're talking similar to Mr. Depo's situation.
Correct.
You're not talking about, you're not talking about just not being here. You're talking
Correct.
about when you're on call, when there's things that come up and you
Yeah.
have to be able to adjust.
And this all happens in the evening. I mean, for 21 years, I haven't been on vacation technically and disconnected from this county without having this up on my side and being sitting at a campfire, logging into a laptop to fix an issue or a problem. I mean, that's remote work.
How do you get Wi-Fi there?
Well, it's sometimes it's
Depending on
spotty.
where a tower is.
Camp next to a tower. Supervisor Romden.
Just another question. Prior to COVID, when all this remote work started, how were all these situations handled? Everybody
I
just
think there
went
was
about their own business?
I think there was an understanding that
Yes.
everybody understood what work was and, they just kind of went about it. But now you have this situation where lots of people are wanting to say, somehow that's changed and then the confusion comes. And so now we're having to clarify things that previously were universally understood, right?
Yes.
Do you have a solution to that other than having a motion like we had for, similar to the previous one for Mr. Depo? I'm serious. If you do, I am very open to.
As I said at the last meeting, if we just get away from this remote or work from home issue and say that COVID never happened and we'll continue the operations as we had for the last 100 years.
Are we willing to, just leave it at that? Do we think that that's okay in Ross's situation, IT? We feel everybody understands, and so we don't need to have a motion?
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
that common sense would say yes. But
The lawyer says no.
right, and exactly, and part of the reason why is we have a policy right now for human service workers, and even so, and while in some ways we wish that COVID had never come, it did. And were people working remotely prior to COVID? Sure, there were people that were working remotely. Was it to the same degree that it is now post-COVID? No. And so kind of the question, and I'll wait till it comes from the administration standpoint, because I think what needs to happen, and this is where I understand the frustration. I completely do. Because this isn't rocket science. It's not. And you've all said it, and I'm not disagreeing that it's not rocket science. It's not. The question comes down to, from a policy standpoint, we have to try to be as clear as we can. And the reason why is because if we don't, well, the policy said I could, or the policy said that I can't, and therefore we have that ugly situation that we do have to be a little more detail oriented. We do have to clarify a little bit more. And therefore, from a standpoint, and I understand what you're saying, Mr. Chair, if Ross takes a call at 9 o'clock at night, technically, he's working remotely. In that same respect, if he were to, he has a meeting at 9 here, but he stays at home to prepare for the meeting. That's technically remote work. He's still doing work for the county. He's just deciding not to do it in the office. And part of the reason why, no different than the human services, is that he's wanting to have less of that distraction. And we can pick all kinds of little ideas. I think what the committee is really trying to do, if I'm correct from what I had heard from last month, the big key more than anything else is accessibility to the public. So if it's about accessibility to the public, then that's probably the main thing to address, because whether IT is there at 8 o'clock in the morning, if Kevin's there, well, it's not even the public, then the office is accessible. And again, we had that definition as to accessibility. Prior to the technology the way it is, accessibility was phone and face to face. And we're seeing more and more that that's starting to trend away. If the board, if the committee, and eventually the board, because it would be a policy, if the board is wanting to stay with that, there needs to be the physical accessibility that is absolutely within your authority. Absolutely within your authority. So part of the difficulty is that technology has helped to muddy all of this.
Well, the board has expressed that work is work. You go to work, you're at work. And that's a big part of it. I mean, Apple, other places, I mean, that certainly have accessibility are requiring people, Facebook, to return to work. So.
And there are others that are doing the opposite, but I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, Mr. Chair.
I think I think that the committee has made it
Clear.
position pretty clear that we're not going in the direction of those. And I mean, there's now talking about the lack of the loss of loyalty when people are working purely remotely. There's just a host of issues. And we talk about insurance costs, dramatic increases, mental health, everything else. Anyway, so what the committee is trying to accomplish is to go back to normal. And going back to normal for Mr. Loining allowed him, to receive calls and be working off-site as needed.
But if you go with the policy, IT is not able to do that.
But you were doing it prior to COVID.
I've been
With
doing
the
it for
policy-
21 years.
With the
I mean,
policy in place.
Yeah, policy was there.
The same
Well,
policy.
Well, it just means we weren't following policy.
Well, we were following policy. We were very much following policy. It's just that none of these other things were imagined.
The policy was common sense.
It wasn't spelled out. None of
The
this stuff
policy was
spelled
common
out.
sense. Now somebody looks out the window, it's snowing out today, so I'm gonna work from home. And that's getting away from all the common sense stuff, because then you're making excuses and you can make up a million of them to stay home. But something like Ross, or for you,
Yes.
that's totally understandable. And I'm sure there's other departments, when the ag agent is out doing a farm call, she's not in the office.
Right.
Or,
Maintenance department.
yeah.
They have the
How-
ability
You know,
to
the-
unlock and lock doors. They have the ability to, if the jail calls and says we're cold, they can log in from home. They can actually turn up the temperature in the jail without having to make,
But there's also, but it isn't, work cannot be, there are other aspects of work cannot be done purely remotely. And when we talked last meeting about department heads being able to supervise remotely, well, some of that maybe could be done remotely, but being a supervisor is also part of being a supervisor as a leader. And I don't believe that you can lead a department from the couch at home. I don't believe that. But I do agree with your situation. I do believe is different. And I do think what the board the committee is trying to do here is unscramble. Though I think you're going to have a hard time unscrambling those eggs when we talk about, going back. I think a simpler, so I think you have to have, and I think Corporation Council would agree, I think you have to have some kind of clarification here for Mr. Loynin, and I think a simple way to do that is to pass the same motion that you did for Corporation Council.
Are we gonna do this on a case-by-case basis for every department that's gonna come in?
At this point, yes.
I mean, wouldn't it be easier to just kind of amend the policy and
Well, this is what we.
I'm not saying I'm all for work from home just because
Right,
I want
but
to
the
work from
committee.
home. But I mean, we're gonna waste a lot of time for a lot of employees coming in here and have I don't want to say an excuse or a reason
Well,
to work from
what are your
home.
solutions? Because the reason we are dealing with this right now is because the committee was unhappy with finding out that, work at home was just going on broadly. So
I think
how do
things
you,
got taken advantage of, and it ended up that all of a sudden complaints started coming into people's, and so that's where we kind of were stuck, because all of a sudden it was like we had blinders on. Okay, why are these complaints? what's happening, but we didn't know what was really going on when, again, it was just common sense and, you know, if everyone just did their job in a proper way without taking advantage of certain situations, we
Another
wouldn't
way,
be in this situation.
another way to do it would be you could amend the policy to say that department heads can grant the authority as needed, including to themselves, with the expectation that under normal circumstances, people are not working virtually. And it is reported, and the amount of time, the occasions when people are working remotely is reported to the executive committee.
Even I would hope they wouldn't make a weekly thing out of this. It's for exceptions, like you said, work from home. And that helps all of our employees for like Corp Council said, if you gotta go to Green Bay first for a while or whatever. I think there's options for it, but to just say no for everybody is, I mean, we're in different times here, but I would hope people wouldn't take advantage of it and work from home 3 days a week. There's no
We
reason.
had
to
it
work
going on
from
more
home.
than 3.
Is that,
We had it going on more than 3 days.
I'm just saying, Jeff.
So I think there has to be something in place to get to where you want to be. And I do think, as I sit here and listen, I do think one possibility is to say department heads can grant permission to work from home when needed. And those instances would be reported to the executive committee. If the executive committee is seeing a report and, you know, you have concerns, then you know, you would be aware, and if you feel it needs to be taken up, you could do so.
So doing that, by writing it up that way, would that be for each department? Correct?
If we said that department heads, that would be all department heads. If we said department heads could grant permission to work virtually or remotely when needed when needed, and those instances would be reported to the executive committee when done so. I would leave it at that. I was going to try to put in a word to say extreme circumstances or something, but then you just get into, but if it's being reported to the executive committee, you're going to know, and if you don't like it, you take it back up. So you would need to have a motion to say department heads can grant permission to work remotely when needed. Those instances would be reported to the executive committee on a monthly basis.
Including department heads.
They would be included. If a department head can grant that authority, they would grant it to themselves. But I dare say if a department head was going to grant themselves the authority to work from home, 5 days a week, and that's reported to the executive committee the following month, I think you guys might have some questions. As long as they're prepared to answer those questions, I guess it'd be fine. Sound good? Does that seem like a reasonable solution, Mr. Depot? Is that legal?
It would be. I guess I'm just working through some of the details.
And I wasn't, if somehow you could reiterate that again. I have department heads can grant permission to work remotely when needed.
Mhm.
And then
Those occasions would be, those incidents would be reported to the executive committee the following month. So we would know how much remote work is being done.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure,
What information you want reported, right, that places, departments, and places.
we would want to know how many employees were working remotely, what the reason, some sort of a general reason, and how much time it was.
Are you talking about, I'm on vacation Friday, I get a phone call.
No,
No.
I don't want to hear from you.
How much
I'm kidding. Jason. Yes, sir.
I guess some way to also word it that any certain amount of time would be reported to you would be a lot better. I can't imagine the logistical nightmare of me trying to keep track of every time we call an investigator or an officer to ask them a question, or somebody has court and they call the officer and I can't keep track of that. So if we could, any regular instances of working at home on a repeated basis get reported to you,
Yes.
or something like that, so that we don't have to report every phone call, because I don't think we could legitimately take.
No,
track
I get your point. The problem I'm having, that I'm having difficulty clarifying or trying to find a way to clarify, if anybody has a better idea, is, in your case, you're talking about investigators who, are salaried and they work their regular, day, and then they get called out in the middle of the night. Mr. Loining works his regular life, and then he gets a call at 9 p.m. that he has to take. I really don't want to know. I mean, I don't want to speak, and I think I speak for the committee, but the nodding of heads is, I don't want to know how often your investigators have to go out at odd hours outside of. I want to know if somebody is working from home on a given day because their child is sick. And so rather than come in, they're working from home. So I don't know how to clarify
Some
that.
language like for a significant period of time, so that you don't have people giving entire reports about a half an hour.
A minimum threshold of hours,
Beyond 3 hours.
the day or the week.
Day. Week. Yes.
Wouldn't that be just part of those people's job description? I mean, I'm certain that it's in your job description.
Well, it's not that I'm on call, but
Well, exactly.
it's assumed.
And your job description, your investigators, isn't that kind of just part
It
of
is.
their
It is,
job?
but there's conflicting,
Right.
when we read this policy word for
Right.
word, it conflicts. So it is part of your job, but it came to light because of what happened recently, so.
It's not going to be in everybody's job description, though.
Well, no, it won't, but I mean,
I suppose that
once
we
again,
could put,
common sense would.
we could put unless a specific job description. But I don't know that the job, I think you're going to get into endless.
Yeah, if I could make some suggestions.
Yeah, please.
I would, rather than trying to come up with maybe one more person who wants to present, to have this ability to work remotely, or have his department, the staff work remotely this evening. My suggestion would be taking that information and everything else we talked about, trying to come up with some policy language that makes sense over the course of the next month before the next meeting, rather than trying to throw something out there right now.
So
and
another-
having to adjust it.
So we could simply say, we'll grant, I guess we would need to, we will grant these until the next executive committee meeting.
You
And in
could
the
give temporary authority until
And then in the
a
meantime,
policy is
Mr.
done.
Depo will come up with some more precise language.
Figured I was gonna do all the writing, so the less writing I have to rewriting after.
Does that sound reasonable to the committee? As long as this is done, I think we have at least kind of, Claire gotten some, at least a little bit of a,
No matter how deep you get in the weeds, you're never gonna satisfy everybody. You're not gonna solve.
well,
every
we're not looking to
particular issue.
satisfy everybody. We're looking
So I
to
like
serve.
the idea of having, go back to where we were prior to COVID and move forward.
I don't think we can unscramble those eggs, so. Yes, sir.
The main reason we got into this is because the public was coming to an empty office.
Yeah.
And two of them, at least that I know. of. So that's simple. Deal on it.
Well, I think, is the committee okay with what, granting this authority until the next meeting and kind of formulating, fleshing out a little bit of what I've described? Does that seem like a,
May I make one suggestion,
Mhm.
Mr. Chair? Not necessarily the next meeting, but temporary until a policy is established, because who says it may take more than next.
yeah, have it on next month's meeting.
We'll have it on the next
If we
agenda,
get it
yes.
done, we get it done, but right. Does that seem reasonable? Are we heading in the direction that seems logical to the committee?
I think what Tom just said, pre-COVID, that policy worked for you and for you guys. And
But I,
Not that,
right.
not that
we
a
were
certain
doing it,
office
we
was
just
closed, because I don't think that happened pre-COVID.
Well, yes and no. And I think this is where the chair is right, and I'm just gonna delve into mine as well, is where there's the real issue, human services, there's not an issue. There's enough people, it doesn't matter. Even with the highway, you have enough office staff there that someone's there. Highway staff, there's enough people there. It's when you have register of deeds, county administrator, you know, two people offices where one could be sick or vacation or whatever else, where, and we have certain folks that are at a conference and their conference lasts whatever, and there's a vacation. So it's those types of things. And then what some of these remote policies have talked about is, okay, that's fine, that's not regular, but the most important part is you have to then coordinate that if the office is going to be closed, that there's another body that can take a message, or that the phones are forwarded or whatever else. Because again, that's what I think the biggest issue is. Because I'll go from my standpoint is I have plenty of work that's outside the office. Peggy could be sick or has a medical emergency or the like. Or I'll do it a different way, which is the bigger, probably the one more for me is there are times that I do some of my better work from a strategic planning and the like when I'm not in the office. So that may mean I purposely for that week or be during budget time that I will purposely come in an hour late. Well, you're still getting your time from me, you know this, but again, from the unscrambling of the egg, the policy says otherwise. And I think that's where you made a good point, Mr. Chair.
I think that the committee has been very clear. We want people to be at work under normal circumstances, and even in your instance, you know, I don't have any problems with some degree, you know, with what you've described. But there, I would ask, you know, okay, you're gone all morning or you're gone all afternoon. Does the county know that they're getting their time? I mean, or is the village of Luxembourg?
Well, I'll say it this way, Mr. Chair. Anytime I'm out of the office, you do not absolutely know whether you're getting the time. Why? Well, even if I am in the office, you honestly don't know if you're getting your time. The point comes down to is, am I getting the things done that you want me to get done? And that's true of any department.
That's not purely the definition of, that's not the purest definition of work, and that's not the only aspect. There are other aspects that are involved, and I've described some of them. There are other aspects, those connections, that mental state of being at work versus elsewhere, the collaboration. I mean, whatever happened in the public schools prior to COVID, it was all about collaboration. I remember distinctly being at a parent-teacher conference for math and being told, well, it's nice if they get the right answers, but math isn't all about getting the right answers. It's more important that they're learning to collaborate. Now, I'm not opposed, you know, I'm all for collaboration in schools. I mean, we call it recess, you know, learning to do that. But I don't understand what's happened, because prior to COVID, it was all about collaboration. I mean, my gosh, everything was collaboration, but now COVID came and we can get rid of that altogether and everything can be done remotely. No, that's not, there's more to work than just, I can show that I accomplished this number of things. A lot of other aspects that are not going to be replaced unless you're replacing people with machines. Anyway, all right, so I'm going to need a motion to table this, that we will grant.
I have it as, Mr. Chair, I have it that the motion would be to grant temporary authority to department heads to, temporary authority to department heads to grant permission to work remotely when needed until a policy is approved by the executive committee. Is that fair?
I think if somebody wants to make that motion, that would be what we would be doing until we do something a little bit.
So are we talking all departments or the corp council, IT and administration tonight?
The way I understood it, because of the number of departments that would be coming to the committee, otherwise is that it would be to all departments until a policy has been thoroughly discussed and approved by the executive committee to be recommended to the board. Is that a fair assessment, Mr. Chair?
I think that's kind of where you would have to be in the interim here, because, for example, Sheriff's Department has spoken. I'm assuming Mr. Every in the coming months will have some people working remotely from a truck cab and other, although I think that's pretty clear, his department should be common sense, but
A work site is a work site regardless of where it is.
Right.
The question would come down to, I'm working from someplace, but it's not a county work site. I'm working from a,
I think we can
Coffee shop or
clarify this
something.
fairly easily, with another discussion next month based upon what I described, but I think there needs to be more conversation.
I agree, Mr. Chair.
Is there a motion?
I would make that motion.
A second?
I'll
Supervisor Lukes, further discussion. This is just going to be a interim thing until we clarify, which very possibly would be next month.
Recent events have certainly drawn more attention to the policy
Mhm.
and putting it out there for one year now, but it does, having this temporarily in place does certainly help us for how well this can work or go back.
I'll support the motion, waiting clarity at the next meeting.
Clarity, that's the key. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. I know that was a long, painful discussion, but I think we did make some important headway. Holiday compensation, jailer dispatchers.
Yes, Mr. Chair. You have partially in your packet, a request from the Sheriff's Department regarding holiday pay for jailers. There was not a financial impact for the overtime, so I have included that as well, but I will let Chief Deputy Baser kind of go over the request and the justification.
I know this meeting is dragging on. I'll try and make this as quick as I can. We meet with our staff regularly, and the beginning of this year, I met with our jail staff one-on-one, and one of the things that came up with our jail staff overwhelmingly was, I'm sure it was time of year, and that's probably a big part of it, because it was right after the first of the year that I started meeting with everybody individually. We talked about motivation and how we can retain employees and why we were losing them and stuff. And the thing that kept coming up in interview after interview was they were, I don't know how I want to say exactly, upset or they didn't think it was right that they weren't getting paid time and a half on holidays. So what happens in all of our neighboring counties, and everyone I checked with, to be honest, is a common what jailers and dispatchers commonly get is if they have to work on a holiday, they get paid time and a half. So they get 8 hours holiday pay, just like everybody else in the county. And then when they have to work the holiday, they get time and a half. That's really hard when you work all these goofy shifts all year long, and then you have to work Christmas and all your holidays in the fall, and you're not getting paid at least time and a half while you're working them. And you talk to people from other counties, and all these other counties are getting paid time and a half for working them. I think maybe it's just an oversight when we came up with the personnel policy, in that, when they were in the union, they got paid time and a half on holidays, and then they got out of the union and they no longer did. So we are just asking for what Door County, Brown County, Manitowoc County, and actually everyone else I checked with.
Can you clarify for me so I make sure I understood you correctly? they get 8 hours, okay, let's say it's Christmas Day, okay? They're getting 8 hours holiday pay.
Just like everyone else in the county, yes. All of our county people get 8 hours pay.
And if they have to work, what happens?
Right now, they get straight time.
Plus the 8 hours holiday pay.
Yes. It's a common practice when you have to work these
Common
holidays.
practice.
You have
I
to,
believe, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, is that holiday pay is, so doesn't matter, Chris, pick your holiday, it's holiday X. Everyone gets 8 hours of holiday pay. Those folks then that have to work the holiday, not only get the holiday pay, but time and a half. The
That's
highway
2.5.
does as well.
That's 2.5 times.
Correct,
That's 2.5.
correct.
If I may,
Yes.
but
we just recently revised the personnel policy request a year ago in order to have that for our employees who do have to work on holidays and also Saturdays and Sundays.
it's a way of life, but if you put yourself
Yes, it
in
is.
somebody's shoes who has to work these holidays, Christmas isn't Christmas. Everyone else gets the 8 hours of pay and they get off and they get to have Christmas on Christmas.
Do you understand who you're saying this to? Okay, go ahead.
You chose that profession.
Yes,
Most
I did.
people didn't. And
Yes,
most
I
people-
certainly did.
Most people
And so
have
did
off
they.
on holidays. And those of us that have to work holidays and have
Pay
to
the holiday
replan
pay,
Christmas.
plus you get paid double time. And now you're saying you want it to be 2.5 times.
And it's the common practice everywhere.
It's not. I think common practice in government, maybe. It's not common practice in private sector anywhere. No, it's not.
Certainly at the paper mills it is. I believe they get double time when they work.
I'm sorry? Yes.
Double time, we're talking 2.5 times.
This is why we lose so
No,
many.
it's time and then time and a half. So he's saying double time plus the holiday pay.
Well, is there a motion from the committee? Because I don't think anybody has to guess where I'm at on it, but if, you know, whatever the committee wants to do. Is there a motion? Otherwise, I'm gonna move on.
So I just want to clarify, so he's getting paid 2 times,
So,
That's not enough.
or
Well,
no, or
only-
wait,
They're getting double time. Currently, they get double time. They want 2.5 times.
what happens,
One, 2.5.
Supervisor Kroll, is if a employee
Yeah.
Christmas, they get paid 8 hours of their straight pay, whatever that is.
Yeah.
If you are a highway worker, if you are, and what they're asking for the jail,
Yeah, I just want to do jail.
jail, then what would happen is if you are working on that holiday, your rate of pay would be time and a half, 1.5,
And that's,
on top of the
and
1%.
that's 2.5.
Correct.
Pay. That's 2.5. Instead of double time, they would be getting 2.5. That's simple math.
Otherwise, they're coming in on Christmas for straight time because everyone in the county gets the 8 hours of pay for staying
Straight
home.
time plus the time, that's double time.
So right now, if you're home, you
This
get
is
8 hours,
insane.
even if you don't work.
Correct.
Yes. And then
So
if you
there's no-
come in, you get paid for working 8 hours. So you're getting double time.
But the big question is, what is the plan? What is the incentive? for?
Right.
The
So one
incentive to
person, one
work
person
is,
staying home and getting the same,
the
yeah.
incentive to work is that you're getting paid for an extra day on top of
But
getting
so is
the,
person
on
at
top
home.
of getting the holiday pay, you're not, but the person at home isn't getting the regular hourly wage. So if you come in, you're getting your regular time plus the holiday pay. Supervisor Romden.
This is probably a technical thing too, but back in the day when I used to be an administrator, when we had people, and these are back in the days of union contracts. If you were scheduled to work on a holiday, you got time and a half for working that holiday, but you were able to take another day off at some other time as your holiday and get paid for it, but you didn't get double time on that particular day. You got time and a half for that day and you got a day off. And you can work it in
But it was
They
essentially.
make them for Valley, so it's basically the same thing, but it doesn't sound as bad.
It doesn't sound as bad, but it's still 2.5 times. Yes, Supervisor.
Can I just say, when I was a tool and die maker, if I had to go in on a holiday, I got paid my holiday pay plus triple time, so. I really don't think that's unreasonable, given the fact that, like I said, everybody else in the county that didn't have to work that day is getting that 8 hours of holiday
Yes.
pay anyway. So all these guys are asking for is time and a half to work on a holiday. That is not that
They're
much to
asking
ask
2.5,
for work
but
on
they're
a
getting the
holiday.
holiday.
If
plus
you
the
want to
holiday.
retain good employees, you have to take care of them. I only have 4 employees myself, and if we have to go in on a holiday, I mean, I'm just a small tree business, but those guys are getting paid their holiday pay.
You get
And I'm gonna pay 'em
times at the
double.
farm.
Right? Otherwise, you're not gonna keep good people.
On Christmas. That's
Or
what
a holiday.
that's what it is currently. Double.
I would like to make a motion. We propose, change to the holiday.
2.5. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed? Aye. This is the most ridiculous. Okay,
Be an extra budget or start effective.
all right, tourism coordinator, public
That's a good
information duties.
I would assume that because it's
ACEDC.
passed, it would be.
Right
starting this
away,
year.
we're giving money away right now. All right, KCEDC, what do you got? Oh, sure, there, you've been sitting there all this time.
Yep, nice and
Oh,
quiet.
You getting double time for that? Or holiday, you two days.
So, we're made aware that, this guy Gonzalez vacated the PIO tourism position. You know, so given the timing of everything, we thought we'd at least have a conversation. So the KCBC would be interested, if the county is interested, in considering moving the tourism responsibilities of that role to the EDC. What that looks like right now, we don't have that fleshed out. We didn't put a lot of energy into that unless there was a desire. Part of the reasons that we feel it would make sense, tourism is one of our leading industries within the county. Its economic impact here is, 375 jobs, $27 million in direct spending. It provides about 2.9 million in local and state tax. The other reason it actually strategically aligns with where we're at in terms of talent attraction and where our local businesses desires are. So about 15 to 20 of our largest employers in the county have housing as their top issue to attract talent, to address workforce issues and those types of things. So the number one attraction tool to getting people to relocate to an area is tourism. They come here, visit on a weekend, they come for maybe shanty days in Algoma, or they come for something else. They realize it's a great place to live, and then that helps on the housing side, because then if you're working towards housing and real estate development, then the theory would be is that then those people would start filling those homes, filling some of the vacated jobs that we have locally and those types of things. A lot of our comparable counties in the state currently house their tourism, whether that's through a visitors bureau or a more countywide chamber of commerce. It is usually partnered in the same office as their economic development. By example, like Marquette County and Oconto County are similar in size. Door County obviously is probably our most local example that does this. So it just made sense given that the position was vacated. I believe historically the tourism role was a part of the KCEC as well. And our board of directors, as well as myself, have also been working with our 3 local chambers on some shared initiatives that focus on building a Kewaunee County brand, so that it's not each individual chamber doing their own activities. It's been very successful for places like Door County, So, with that, we can answer questions or things like that. So I don't know what that relationship would look like moving forward, but we wanted to at least have that conversation since the opportunity was there and it aligned with some of our broader economic strategies.
Questions?
Question, but, how long has this position been at the county? About at least 5 years.
Yeah, we brought it in, I believe, in the 2016 budget for 17, so 5 years, yes.
And
6 years.
what were we paying? Approximately, round number.
$25 an hour, so call that 50 something.
The 22 salary on the county budget was 53,777
There you go.
with its departments.
No,
Once you factor in benefits and websites and all the other stuff, it comes out to 104,000 and change.
is this position now that it's vacant, is this something that could be absorbed internally between your office and the rec and promotion department and the IT department? My reason for going that direction is we're looking in the next couple of years to cut jobs or cut positions to pay for our deal again. Is this an opportunity for us to try to move these jobs and these various things into spread them out within the county so that we can retain that extra money for future wages? And I don't know if that's something that's possible.
Anything's possible, Supervisor Romden. So from that standpoint, could we go back to how we used to do it? Absolutely, we could. What I have in my budget is that I still believe that the public information officer, tourism coordinator is an important position with the website and with helping to get information out to the public and to the news outlets as to what we do in the county. As for the tourism aspect of it, it was about 4 or 5 years ago that KCDC transferred. We had a conversation and those tourism duties were transferred to us. Do I have any strong affiliation of wanting to keep those duties? No, I think that if it's believed that KCDC can do those duties well, then why not? That's a good alignment of what needs to be done. I think the part of the public information officer, which does a lot of our social media, which continues to keep our website up to date and working with the different departments on press releases, I think that's an important job that I would like to continue to have a person do. Part of the reason why I have not have gone to try to recruit for the position is because until not more than just a few weeks ago, I wasn't sure where we were going to be from a budget standpoint. And the last thing that I wanted to do was start filling for a position and then see that we need to make cuts, because that to me wasn't being prudent. Seeing from the budget that where we are, we still can have the PIO position, and depending from a position standpoint and the dollar standpoint, we'll see where we are in the future regarding the positions for the sheriff's department. But I understand your concerns, Supervisor Romden.
Clarify for me, please, your comments there. You said we can still have the PIO, the public information officer position.
Correct.
And
Well, if the committee so chose that they wanted the tourism duties to remain, that position could do both. I do believe, and if Ms. Gonzalez were here, I believe she would say that the majority of her work was done from the PIO standpoint with press releases, website, social media. She did some tourism duties with regarding vacancy rates during holidays and in campgrounds and hotels, as well as doing a little bit, but most of that tourism stuff was done county-wise, or on the occasion that there was a request for information, she would mail that out. But The majority of her duties was from the public information officer side.
I'm not, still not clear. You're saying the county would have a public information officer
Yes, we
separate from the tourism director?
correct. The tourism coordinator, those duties would be, if this committee wanted to, those duties would be transferred to KCDC. If the committee wanted to do that.
So we would be spending more, not less.
No, you'd be spending the same amount of money.
Well,
Unless-
that's assuming that KCEDC is going to take the tourism duties for free. Because if you have a public information officer, that's a position. We
Correct.
keep that. County keeps that, fills that.
Correct?
And then the tourism coordinator position, which was a part of this position, right?
Correct?
That goes to KCEDC.
Correct?
And KCEDC picks that up for free. Why do
That's up to
I
KCDC.
why do I have a feeling I'm not following this conversation?
That would be up to this committee, because no different than when it was transferred to us. We did not reduce our support to KCDC upon taking on the tourism duties.
Supervisor Coffey, is that what the
I know, I don't think that would be
KCEDC
again.
is? Okay,
For some compensation, at least from the start.
so then we'd be
Which is
looking,
fine.
so then I'm just trying to keep this all clear, because what I'm hearing here is we would take what was one position, tourism coordinator and public information officer,
Correct?
and we would separate it. We would make it purely a public information officer position, no tourism coordinator duties.
Correct.
And
If that's what this committee wants to do.
and we would hope that KCEDC would pick that up and do that all for the county.
That would be
How
up to
many
the
hours
committee.
did she work?
Why do I-
Was she a full-time?
She was a full-time employee.
No, that's not.
Well,
So
and
then-
actually she put in more than 40, but
I don't think that's.
So you're taking work away from that public information officer, would you cut the salary?
Oh,
that
there we
officer.
go. Now we're finally getting something.
Because you're doing less work.
Yeah,
Okay.
If-
so the-
If
so
it
the
is the
supervisor-
information officer a part-time position. Or could it be?
Yes. Halftime
That's right.
at best.
correct.
I like that. Yes.
And that, I guess, is kind of where I guess our mindset was, is that, right, we were pulling 50% or whatever the percentages
Mhm.
ended up being, pulling those responsibilities to KCEDC. We would, given our current capacity, we would probably seek some type of support from the county to make that transition smooth in terms of financial. What that is, we don't know right now. If the committee was interested in hearing that, our intent would be is to put together a more formal proposal of what that looks like for, say, the October Finance Committee or Executive Committee, whichever decided.
What's the current percentage of public information officer duties versus tourism coordinator on that position?
We don't have it to the exact percentage, but the vast majority is public information duties, not tourism duties.
Supervisor Romden?
It would just seem to me that if the position is, as Scott indicates, fairly important, I don't know why this committee would not want to refill the current position. If you're gonna start carving out money from a county employee and then give money to some other organization who has no affiliation with the county at all, why don't we just fill the position?
Supervisor Brown?
Just a thought, you're talking about this extra 0.5% and it's
Yeah, the right
increasing,
giveaway.
and it's increasing a little bit more every year, more than we anticipated. I think you ought to keep in mind too, that if you don't get tourism into Kewaunee County, you don't get people spending money and you ain't gonna get that 0.5%.
But this
Well-
position didn't exist 5 years ago. And it has been very valuable to the county and has had great benefit. The question though, but then I'm being told that that's not the case, is that very small percentage of it is tourism coordinator. And it's all public information officer largely.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Ben, where does the majority of your income or your money come from to fund your department?
Well, I want to say it's about 40% public sector support and 60% private sector support. So that's kind of where our goal is every year for the budget. And I would say, so public sector support has remained stable over the course of time. Prior to my joining KCEDC, in the 3 or 4 years prior to my joining KCEDC, our private sector investment level was declining. Part of what we discovered through our VRE process over the course of the last year was some of our private sector businesses didn't feel that we were representing private sector business enough, and that we were more or less a sub-department of the county, even though we weren't. So our private business wants to ensure that we are representing their interests as well as the public sectors. And so since I have joined KCEDC, so we were 18, 19 months or so since I've been here, our private sector support has increased by over 20%. So we've reversed that trend, and we had those conversations with those private businesses that, you know, their top issue is talent right now. And with our labor participation rate hovering around 98%, we do not have available workforce that lives in the county to address it. So they have kind of identified that building more housing and getting new construction in the county is a priority for them. So that is where a lot of our attention is shifting, and trying to create ways to make that happen, which obviously generates tax base and revenue to the county once those are built and filled. And so we just look at this tourism, that is a major attraction tool, quality of life tool to attract people who want to live here and work here. And that's, you know, a large part of how Door County's success has been over the last 20 years or so, is they market themselves as a destination, come and visit, and then stay and work. And there's no reason that I don't think we would be capable of doing something similar. I'm not saying that we're going to be Door County, but it fits within where our economic strategies are right now.
Were we not planning on rehiring somebody for this position? First of all, let's not talk about,
I was.
okay, so why can't we rehire somebody for this position? Because it's not just the tourist part, but your public information officer does a lot of stuff. So why can't we hire them and then they work with you guys? Because I don't think you just need tourism, this public information stuff, boy, half of the stuff on here is something that you need. So would that not work, or am I missing
Well,
something?
all my years on the board, I've been told how much this position was doing with tourism. Now tonight, I'm hearing that it's largely public information officer, very little tourism. And I was,
Right, but what I'm saying is, why can't we hire
As
this
well as with the
position
news, the news
like
helps
we
to bring
wanted to,
tourism, so,
and
but
they
it's
work
not
with you?
specifically
Well, you
working
get
with
the
the
bang for the
hotels
buck.
or the chiefs. So,
Right.
to me, it's direct PIO.
The local chambers do a lot to promote their own tourism too. It's not a combination of things. It's not one individual. But I think we should fill this
To
position.
answer your question, Supervisor Kroll, again, could I, and would it be my intent to fill the position? Yes, it would. Would be to, you have to push hard, Amber. There you go. It would be my intent to fill the position, but again, the reason why I didn't is I wanted to make sure regarding the budget that it was affordable and sustainable. Now that I know that it is, it's in the budget. But as for what the committee wants to do, that's up to you guys.
position didn't exist 5 years ago.
Right, but
This
this
whole
is an
position.
important position. I think
I
that
agree. I agree it is, but I'm having a hard time understanding the breakdown of this and why it couldn't be reduced.
I'm sorry.
If it's only a public information.
We helped just before Front. It was like 2016.
If I may, please, I heard the comment, did we bring it in from Farm Technology Days? For those of you that don't know, I had a little bit to do with Farm
A
Technology
lot
Days.
to do with farm technology.
I don't know, can't speak for the county board on whether or not Ms. Gonzalez was brought in just because of Farm Technology.
No,
I don't think she was.
no.
Now, did she help immensely? Yes. And when you look at the sales tax and where that increase started, it started in 2017, which was Farm Technology Days. I think what the EDC board is looking at is not necessarily a decision from you guys today. It's more, is this a conversation that we would like to have? And if it is a conversation you guys would like to have, can we come back either to this meeting in October or the finance meeting in October or both with a more formalized proposal of this is what we are thinking? Because right now we've talked about this a total of 7 days. So we're not even really prepared. It was just, okay, the opportunity's here. Do we have the conversation or do we not have the conversation?
And also, I guess I'll add on to that, if you seek a proposal and further conversation, what are some of the challenges or parameters that you would want outlined in it so that we make sure we're not wasting anyone's time evaluating it?
What's the desire of the committee?
I would move to table this issue and because of item 9 on the agenda. Or the other motion I would make is that we authorize the administrator to fill the public information tourism director position. That would be a motion I'll make.
I'll second that.
Motion is to fill the public information officer tourism director position as it is currently, correct?
Yes.
Second by Supervisor Young. Further discussion.
I would like to see KCD's come back with a proposal.
I would agree with that. I don't know if Ben wants to talk about this, but I know the city of Algona's been working with the Viking cruise, and this whole thing with tourism is gonna take tons of time. It isn't just a little issue here. I mean, they're looking at what can they do in Kewaunee County for 8 hours a day. And all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of work that group is
And
into.
without tipping our hand too much, we are in conversation with a collaboration already. on that.
Right, and so I mean, it's gonna just keep going, I'm trying to pull this stuff together, I don't think we're just talking about getting somebody coming in here and fish and everything else, there's a huge amount of tourism work that's gonna have to be done to pull that off next year. And I think we need to keep that in mind of how much work is gonna be involved county-wise to get that done.
When you had Farm Technology Days, you said she helped you tremendously.
She was part of the PR committee.
Yep.
So she helped us with the news outlets. She had the
So
contacts.
what I'm saying is, if we hire somebody like her again, is that an avenue of her coming in or him? Or is that not enough? That's in her job
Okay,
description.
I'm gonna be blunt because that's the way I am. Yes, she could be, if she's
Or
allowed
he,
to,
or
or
he,
yeah,
yeah.
that position could be if they're allowed to.
That's what I meant in the job description. That would be part of it. But I just can't see right now, it's like we're putting a position here, but then why can't we just take one and all work together and then put it into that? Because they helped you in 2017.
A lot of the support that we received was sharing of press releases or sharing social media posts. What we're looking at is, so I'll use the Viking Cruise stops as an example. We're scheduled for 8 stops in 23 in our county, 400 people per stop. The economic impact per stop is estimated to be about $2 million. And right now, we have Brown County and Door County campaigning very hard to pull all of those people out of our county. So it's going to take more than just simple marketing and social media posts. It's going to take coordination of boots on the ground facilitating the historically, we have not been able to get all three chambers to collaborate on an initiative. And the Viking Cruises is an opportunity that we are actively working on right now with our three chambers, of trying to devise strategies to touch and bring in our small businesses within the community that are not Lambeau Field, that are not a winery or a destination location perhaps. And our largest sales tax ramifications within the county, if you look at the month-over-month statistics, it's generated by our small businesses, our restaurants, bars, and those types of things are the backbone of that sales tax that the county collects. So while I'm optimistic that we would be able to work with anybody, it's going to take more effort than what has existed in the past.
It's gonna be much benefit for Kewaunee County if those boats come in. And there's buses waiting there to take them to Lambeau Field, isn't it?
No, I think they have 12 hours or 12 hours.
You think Brown County will find that?
Oh, I'm sure they're gonna try.
People who can hold that,
And did you have somebody in mind?
or ship them up to Door County Peninsula Park?
Or you were just
No, we don't have a specific individual in mind. We need to evaluate that once we figure out what.
Mr. Chairman, there's a motion. I'd like to call the question. Take a vote.
All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Okay, how many were opposed?
Show of hands for opposed. 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, right?
6 in favor.
6 in favor. Motion carries. Cory?
Well, I just want to say, I still don't see why this can't work. It's a tourism position. And she did help you, so,
There have to be limitations and direction on us.
but can't that be worded in a
There is
contract? or-
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
Yeah, that's right. Let's get rid of
that's the motion. All right, moving on, hiring freeze policy. Supervisor Poppy, you were the one that has to have that on the agenda.
Joe.
Yes, you did. So did you want to address it?
Or do you,
Well, I guess it was pretty clear. We at one point had a hiring freeze on, and we took it back off. And I'm proposing the hiring freeze with the exception for temporary help. So it would be the,
So is that a motion?
make that motion, yes.
All right, motion.
so
to-
seasonal and temporary.
Seasonal and temporary, correct.
So it'd go back to the September of 2014.
That is
So I
correct.
have a question.
Wait, I gotta have a second motion before I can have a
I'll
question.
second that motion.
Second by Supervisor Haskell. Now you can ask your question.
So can they, let's say the highway department or the sheriff's department still have a list of
Keep an eligibility list.
Eligibility.
Absolutely. You can have an eligibility list, yes.
Technically, do we not already have a hiring
No.
freeze? No.
No,
Well, just listen to me. Because we won't hire first if we don't need them.
what do you mean we won't?
Who's gonna hire
The administrator?
him? He knows that we can't vote it. He's not gonna hire it if he
He
can't
has,
vote that
well, I mean, that's,
person.
that may be,
Yeah,
but that's his, he has the authority.
The department head, if he can't justify it, he's not gonna get it past the administrator. And he's not gonna get it past our committee.
Doesn't have to come to our committee. It
He's
does
not gonna
not
get it
come,
past, he's
it
not
does
gonna
not
get it
come to
past,
this,
he's not getting it past finance.
does not,
Well,
it's already, if it's already in the budget, if they're,
if I may, Mr. Chair, may I go what the current policy is?
certainly.
Okay, so, and you have that in there. And there was also in your packet kind of a little chart. So personnel policy says that a department head may fill a vacancy if they're filling the vacancy with staff within their department. And it's in the budget. This is not any new positions. New positions are not it. If it's a current vacancy of a staff member that's already budgeted, and you're going to fill that in with a current person within your department, the department head can do that on their own authority. If there is a position open within a department, but you're going to recruit outside of the department, you must receive county administrator approval. Department head, and then anything else that, and any other position, department head or otherwise, the county administrator has to approve it. If it's a department head, it still has to receive approval from the executive committee because it's an appointment. The one that is probably the most important case is, unless it's seasonal or temporary or a contract, no position can be created and done without the executive committee's approval and the finance committee's approval as to the dollar amount. So therefore, if I wanted to add another highway worker to the highway shop and it's not in the budget, the only way that can be done is that there has to be approval by the executive committee from a staff position and the finance committee from a finance position. If there's a highway position within Todd's department that is open and he wants to recruit from outside of his current staff, he has to receive county administrator approval before that vacancy can start to be, that the process can start to be filled. So there is no way that an additional staff person, county staff person, can be approved without executive committee approval.
Additional.
Correct, additional. And I hope that in the past I have shown that I have not added positions without.
No, but when we removed the hiring freeze, you stated at
Correct.
that meeting, you stated that, and that was an issue that came up. Committee chairs were going to know when there were positions. And I think one of the biggest frustrations that I've heard is not just committee chairs, but members of committees finding out on the street, people telling them that, hey, somebody has put a position and it's being advertised and so forth. So that hasn't happened. And what this resolution, what this motion does is it makes sure that the committee and the board, the elected members are involved in this process and know what's going on. That's what it accomplishes. Questions? Any further discussion? We have a motion to put the hiring freeze back in place. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Supervisor Massler opposed. Motion carries. Amendment to Bug Tussle contract.
The reason that we have an amendment to the Bug Tussle contract is that the current promissory note says to make interest payments beginning September of 2022. Yet they have not taken out all of the money that has been put out there. In conversations with Bug Tussle, they believe that they can complete all the rest of the draws before September of next year. So we would just, all we're requesting is that from an administrative standpoint, that we have the payment start in 23, still go out 12 years. It's still the same amount of money. It's just, they haven't pulled all the money out yet. And what we usually do is we don't ask for a payment until you pulled out all the money. Is that a fair assessment, Mr. Kunish?
Almost. Yes.
Shucks.
Regular payments, payments are starting September 1st. The work is still being done, so the project isn't completed for whatever reason. It takes a while. But the common sense is let the project finish,
Yes.
let everything be installed up running, and then the payments start going. We're just pushing everything back.
And there, I have copied and sending around a copy of what the current promissory note, as well as the request that it just be delayed 1 year.
Interest is accruing, don't.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay.
This is not free.
Okay.
That answers my question.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's a
what I
good
was
clarification.
Because if I took a loan out and I only took part of it out of my house,
Right.
I'm still paying interest on the money I already borrowed.
Correct.
Right. So one more time, what are his pushes it?
The repayment dates, instead of starting about 12 days ago, will start next September 1st. By that time, the project is projected to be completed. All the draws will be made. Interest is still accruing from the date of the first draw.
And the reason for this is because
The project is still ongoing. It didn't finish by the end of the summer as I'm guessing they originally projected when the agreement was signed.
Was there any penalties in the original contract if they didn't finish on time?
that was, you know, Supervisor Augustine questions. I remember there was a lot of conversation about this at the time. About meeting deadlines. That'd be a question we would want to know the answer to.
Pretty hard to do though, and I did the equipment.
I think there was, but.
I remember we had the
I
conversation.
think
It's supply chain
I
stuff
think
where
there
you
may have
can't
been.
get it.
And I guess that's a question is,
Well, I guess it's something we should look at in case we have to
think there was-
exercise.
does this committee feel that I mean, that'd be the question is, does this committee feel that they're acting in good faith and that any delays were, you know, not a result of whatever on their part, and we wish to, you know, overlook that.
Could we maybe just have Corp Council take a look tomorrow? And just see if there's
You can-
anything in there?
I was gonna say since it's already passed, it's not overly time sensitive.
I mean, I think that, I mean, they've done a lot of good in the county.
Right.
And we've had a good working relationship, and I certainly would want to, I think that the board would certainly want to keep that going at the same time. I guess that's a question.
So are we just delaying the interest payment? Are they making a principal payment now already, in this September?
No. The plan was, well, they signed the contract in March,
Yes,
and let's go back to the original first. They signed the agreement, they started building towers, and they just made it in before the September 1st payment due date. So they started paying September 1st. The project was up and done. They started paying within days, actually. This time they signed it in March. They've actually been stockpiling the rolls of those orange tubes in the spring already. They're out there and they're digging and burying whatever work they have. It isn't done yet. There's about 448,000 of the 2.2 million that hasn't been taken on loan yet because they haven't got to the work. It's not because they're just not getting to it, that it isn't done for whatever reason. So rather than starting to make payments, the project is completed, it makes sense to allow them to finish the project on the project's timeline. And I think I saw in the newsletter that was projected to be mid to late winter, which would be something like spring or early next year. And then the project is complete, the proceeds are all out, our interest is accruing from day one on any draws. And regular payments would start September 1st of 2023 rather than 2022 while the project is complete.
So the first payment in September of 2023 would be a regular P&I payment plus all accrued interest.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the accrued interest will be rolled into calculating how much their payment's going to be.
Over the next 12 years.
Okay.
Most of that first payment, if this, the longer it's going, more and more and more of that payment's going to be interest. Rather than principal.
Sure. Looking for a motion.
We're looking for something, Supervisor Romden. I guess that's, we don't have Supervisor Augustine's question won't be answered here tonight if that has any bearing on what you want to move. Guess that's the.
I would make the motion that we accept the amendment.
Second, Supervisor Haskey, second. Is there further conversation or discussion or question on that motion? Any other questions? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
All right.
Motion carries. County charge for paper copies.
Currently, there is a number of, there are different charges per page depending on the department. And I think what we should probably do as a county is have a uniform charge per page. We know that some departments it's 20 cents, others it's a quarter, others it's a dime. And I think especially with the amount of information requests, that we should probably have a uniform charge for copies.
What are these charges? Could you just give me some examples of what would we be charging? What was the copies before?
So go ahead, Mr. Depo.
So it's maybe been for any number of things. It could be anything from, I want a copy of the police report of this incident to, I want the county clerk to collect and copy every ballot, every piece of data from the 2020 election. Currently in your possession. Some of those requests were even further than that, but that adds up to, in a lot of cases, even at a dime a copy, thousands of dollars.
How much are you charging for copies of my emails?
If we set a price, then I'll have an answer for you.
I give them. They're not very exciting, but so there's quite a few. There could be quite. How many requests do we receive then on average a year? Then
On an average year, I really wouldn't be able to give you that information. I can tell you that this is not an average year, and this year has been significant.
Really?
To the extent that counties of Wisconsin are trying to come up with.
And what are we? Obviously, we have the right to recover our costs.
Right.
And
In
what
fact,
is
we have
the,
the right to request payment.
yeah, but how is that defined then? What is the, how do you determine our cost? Is there, what latitude is there on that? Because you have,
you
have time
Right, so
involved.
you can recover the costs. It's not, the statute doesn't allow counties to set out.
You can also do staff time if you want.
Yeah, you're not
Right.
Right.
Right, you're at 20 cents, right?
already.
You're at 20 cents, you're at 25.
Yeah, so are you able to include that staffing time in there? Are you able to calculate that staffing time?
Is there a max? There isn't specifically a max, but you have to be careful because if you're too egregious in the cost, then you can be accused of trying to prevent.
What I'm getting at is we should be charging as much as we can to recover our costs. I mean, we don't want to be trying to gouge the public for sure, and we do want to have the public, we do wish to allow the public to have access. But the county, the taxpayers should not be incurring the cost of it.
You know, I think the towns associations has been brought up at towns association meetings. You can charge what it actually costs you, or for the clerk or whatever, the time that it takes them
So
to.
how do you have to calculate their hourly rate, and then that gets you in a whole different thing, department to department?
Usually, if I may, usually what happens, and I remember this with the state, what would be called the normal request. I want a copy of a 50-page document. You would charge them 25 cents a page and nothing for staff time. Why? Because the amount of time to do a 50-page document is minimal, therefore de minimis. Now, if you're asking for every ballot and whatever else, and this is a multi-hour project, then what you can do is you can do, here's the projection of the pages, plus here's the projection of staff time at, here is their hourly rate, here's what you need to pay up front for us to complete this. And the reason why you pay up front is because it's so large, trying to get the payment after the fact becomes difficult.
But, so this, I mean, no, I don't believe, to my knowledge, we've had any of these large requests.
Yeah, we have it with elections, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
now,
They've asked our.
that's
town
why
clerk-
it's not a typical year, is because what you're seeing right now is a large influx of requests.
Well, oh my gosh. So the county could stand to lose some money here
It could.
if we don't take some, if we
And
don't
not
take
every-
some reasonable action here tonight.
Well, possibly. Not every request warrants a response. I mean, some requests are for information that we don't have.
Well, like when they request emails, when we get those requests for anything related to this particular item, you know, any emails related to requests for remote work approval. Those are very easy for Mr. Loiney to pull, and I don't think we've even charged for those.
For the most part, you can't because there isn't enough.
Right.
It's a reasonable amount of time.
But if
It's when
we-
it's beyond a reasonable amount of time that you
Right.
can charge.
But if we are going to get into this, then it would seem to me that we possibly need to have a two-tiered system.
Well, my suggestion,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, and
please.
for the committee is this. The most important part is you want to have a uniform per page
Okay.
charge. So what do a lot of counties do? A quarter. That's not, and some do 50 cents, and there are others that may do 50 cents, but quarter is very standard. Now, when it goes to the large ones, then what happens is it's not even necessarily a tier. You can say, because of that large request, we're going to charge you for the per page, but we're also going to charge you for staff time. And you can have that in some policy if you'd like, but that's not uncommon. And if someone were to take us to court for it, I don't want to speak for the counselor, but I believe we'd be in a strong position.
But do we need to do that? Do we need to have that two-tiered, or would we always be in this county, would we always be recovering at a quarter? Or if we have a large request, do we need to have that up front? We'll charge you staff time?
So the issue that comes up is the complexity of the request and what's actually being requested. So some of the requests are for associations or organizations to have their own staff or independent people come in to clerk's office and open up ballot bags that have been sealed and start paging through ballots to personally inspect them. Now, I am not going to do all that. I think I have a pretty good standing on denying that request. However, if we have to pay staff for ballots, but if we have to pay staff to bring staff in addition to what we already have, to supervise the review of other documents that are not ballots and do not have that level of sensitivity, that does add up.
So what do we want to do?
I think the biggest issue that you want to do, Mr. Chair and committee, is right now you have departments that charge a different per page fee. And I think we should have a uniform per page fee, whatever that should be. We have, I forget, I'm not sure if the clerk does 10 cents. I know that I believe highway does 20. I believe the sheriff's department does a quarter. So we have various rates. And I think we should have a uniform county rate regardless of the count of the department.
Okay.
If you're asking for copies, here's how much it is per page. And then when it becomes more complex, then they would work with Mr. Depot as to how are we going to structure what that cost would be.
How do we have to word that up? How do we have to word that tonight?
You could easily say something to the point of, I make a motion that that the county charge for paper copies will immediately be 25 cents per page.
Is that a good number? And then, but what about the second part? Do we have to have that included at all?
I don't think I'd try and tackle that without first looking at.
Okay, so.
Because it's a case by case thing, so I don't think you
Okay.
need to have a second one, personally.
I think there's something in either in the open records law or in the statutes that references what and when you can charge over and above normal copy.
Yes.
So you might want to review that.
Right,
just
so
a
we're
simple,
establishing normal
motion
copy.
to Charge a standard quarter of a copy. Tonight will do it
A quarter per page, yes.
per page. Supervisor Masteler, second by Supervisor Kroll. Further discussion?
Well, and just to muddy the waters a bit.
I almost made it.
Almost.
Almost.
Copies, so recovering the cost of the physical copy is one thing. We're trying to work in some of the cost of staffing to handle that request as well. I think this could be a topic for another day, but what is sometimes equally expensive, maybe not for the physical thing that you're receiving, but for the time in putting together the response to the request is that sometimes they request these digital format. Meaning you may still have to go through and take paper copies of everything and create now and do format for that. So put it in digital format for the person, the recipient, for the requester.
Is the law clear on that?
You don't, oh, well, you don't have to create.
Why create something that you didn't
Because
have?
I'll say it this way, my understanding is this. They can ask for information, they cannot, because that's the information you have. If they're requesting you to run a report, you do not necessarily have to run a report, because that's not a record that you have. And the part that I'm not clear about is, if I have it in paper form, must I now digitize it?
Right, so running a report, well, that assumes that it's in paper form in the first place. So if you're asking for a bulk of emails about a whatever, that could be thousands of emails, you still have to go through and generate that document.
Correct.
So you have to make it, you may not have to print it, but that still may take a
Correct.
significant amount of time.
Correct.
So I don't know if it has to be a separate per page fee for digital content or
The same price for.
I think from a digital standpoint, the usual law is if it's a digital thing, you're not charged for the digital, but you can charge for the time.
I believe that's right. I'd have to take another.
I'm almost positive from my state
Okay,
work.
well, it sounds like the motion is okay or not? That this takes care of what we need to tonight.
We're just standardizing.
All right. All right, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
All right.
Opposed? Okay, the next meeting would be scheduled for October.
On the next meeting, can we bring up about this hiring of this tourism thing?
I can have it on the,
Discuss
sure.
Possibly maybe changing the format of the job description that we can look at using this person.
Well, I'll say it this way, Supervisor Kroll, because of what happened on item 9, that has to happen.
Yes. So it has a hiring freeze.
Okay.
So therefore, any type of job description, everything else will have to go through this committee.
Yeah.
And in that same respect, any vacancy, as long as it's not a seasonal or an LTE, must first come through this committee and be approved before the process can be done to recruit and fill. So if there's a highway worker that retires, that is not, we don't start the process until this committee approves it.
So just to clear up on that, I thought we made the motion to fill the vacancy prior to this hiring freeze going into effect.
Right.
But then the hiring freeze went into effect.
Afterwards, okay.
Either way, I'm going to assume that it's going to be safer for me to have it go through the committee.
All right, so I've got the October 3rd meeting, or October 3rd would be the next meeting at 6 o'clock. Supervisor Poppy had a problem, but that's the one that I would have it.
I won't be able
Up to your eyeballs and something. Okay, so. All right.
October 3rd.
I guess so.
It is. This is our- You can't make the 3rd. I'm gonna have half of the committee out on the 3rd. What if we moved it? I can't do the 5th. Unless you wanted to start at,
You want to do the 10th?
unless you wanted to start at 7. 10th, Supervisor Poppy can't do. Can others do on the 10th? 10th works for everybody but Supervisor Poppy. No, you can't.
Yeah, I won't be here either, because I'm going Monday.
How about
I
October,
forgot about
how
that.
about October 11th? How about October 4th? Anybody besides Supervisor Kroll that can't do the 4th? Supervisor Rondon and, what are you retirees? Jeez. I can't do the.
Basketball starts.
I can't do
And
the six, I
volleyball.
might be at Dairy Expo.
Very actually will. I couldn't do
It's date night.
fifth date night. Okay. Well, hopefully your wife knows about that.
I'll take her with.
So it looks to me like we're at the 3rd, it's 6 o'clock. Is there, who was not gonna make October 3rd at 6? I got 3 out. And the 4th was bad for everyone, right? Or who was not gonna make the 4th? Supervisor Romden. Anybody besides Supervisor Romden that wouldn't make the 4th? So we'd have 2.
I can make the fourth.
So we'd only have 2 out on the 4th. On the 4th, if we start, so I'd be down to 1 out if we
Well,
started
if
at
you-
5.
if it's early, if it's
How
6
early on the
o'clock, I
4th?
can't make.
How early on the 4th? 5 o'clock on the
Four?
4th?
4:30?
I can't show up before 5 o'clock.
If you do it during the
You could
day,
be here at
if you
5 on the
want
4th?
How about 8 in the morning?
5?
How about 8 in the morning?
No, some of us work for
No.
it. I have to, who will run the trash heap?
5 o'clock, you're fishing?
Go back to the remote.
You have a quorum, so.
Would 5 o'clock on the 4th? How many can't make 5 o'clock on the 4th? 1, 2,
Be close, I don't
be
know.
close. I'm looking like 5 o'clock on the 4th is gonna be the best. Now, was there any fewer, on any of those days, was there anybody that was,
Might come with something on their shoes so they can explore.
What about 5:30? Easier to make it 5:30.
well, Supervisor Haskell will be coming in hot.
Yeah, I'm coming, yeah, right to my meeting. I have to turn it over to
You
the.
know, October
Vice chair.
4th, October 4th at 5, right?
So it's October 4th.
October 4th, 5. That's the most people that we can accommodate. For those that, sorry, seem to have busy schedules here. All right, motion to adjourn. Second,
So which one was who moved?
he moved,
Okay.
she second.
Okay,
All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? We're out of here.
8:37. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone wants, I have Rotary raffle tickets. 1 for $5
VIP ones?
and 5 for 20. Grand prize, 2 tickets to football's biggest game in Glendale, Arizona, plus $1,000 cash. Second prize, 1,000, third, 500, fourth, 300, fifth, 200.
What I'm saying is this position-
Bring my all, I'll get my book on it.
Yes, we do.
Bring some tickets
See,
tomorrow.
I feel both of these positions are to utilize, right?
Have a good night.
Not just
Good night.
supervising, but the media part of it as well. Well,
They
both
say,
positions.
city administrator.